It's a pleasure to introduce Josh Adler. He's the founding chief executive of Sourcenergy. He's founded several other technology companies and served as chief speechwriter for U.S. Treasury Secretary under President George W. He's a graduate of Yale and MIT, where he was a Sloan Fellow for Innovation and Global Leadership in Energy Ventures, and he holds 12 U.S. patents and has been published in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, The Economist, and Wired. Josh?
Thanks, Eric. Is it better if I talk from here? Can you have the microphone from here? Thanks. I prefer to kind of stand out from behind the podium so that by the end, if things are going really well, we're all rocking, I'm going to do a stage dive and you're going to catch me. You can see that's, I can see you all coming down now. That's right, getting ready for the music. So I actually do have a question. Speaking of getting rocking, how many of you have heard of Sourcenergy before? I mean, it's a decent number. How many of you heard of us last year? This is a couple. See, we weren't even called Sourcenergy last year, so I know you're just being nice. But we are on a roll with mineral investors, and so we're very happy to be here at MARC this year. It's been a great year for us, and what I'm going to introduce you to is how we're using new forms of energy intelligence to change the ground game and valuations for mineral investors. So first, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on us, since there's at least a few of you who still haven't heard. I'm going to talk about how there are new technologies available that enable new kinds of energy intelligence. And then I'm going to show you how we can use these new kinds of technologies to meet key mineral investor objectives, including getting an edge in the ground game, developing better valuations, so you know which deals to get aggressive for and which ones to avoid, and getting a faster time to pay on the deals that you do make. As a quick bit of background, Sourcenergy strives to be the technology leader in geospatial energy and minerals intelligence. I started the company back in early 2014, coming out of some ideas I had when I was a Sloan Fellow in Energy Ventures at MIT. We've had 16 patents granted for our geospatial data fusion methods, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. We've got some major minerals, E&P, and oilfield services customers, and today mineral investors are actually our leading customer category and our major growth area. And if you haven't heard of us yet, it's because the kind of customer referrals that we get are like this guy, who I think is actually in the room right now, who, when we asked him for a referral to other mineral investors, said, quote, "We like the edge Sourcenergy gives us over our competitors, so we're not out recommending it." So that puts me in the position of having to toot our own horn, unfortunately, but hopefully the word will keep getting around. So how did we get into this? Well, Sourcenergy, way back when, about 6 months ago, was called Source Water, and that's because when we first got into this in 2014, our objective was to create the first platform for buying and trading and understanding water in the oil and gas industry. And what we realized, come around 2017, was that a key step in the supply chain for all horizontal oilfield activity is frac ponds or frac pits. You have to know where that water is. And it turns out that there are no permits for frac pits, at least not in Texas. So no one knew where the water was, and you just couldn't find it using conventional intelligence methods, which historically basically means companies that scrape drilling permits, chew it up, and spit it on a map. You couldn't find the frac ponds that way. And so how could we find these key oil field features without having any permits to find them? Well, we had the idea in 2017 of, could we find frac ponds from space looking in satellite imagery? And so we started building out systems using machine learning and artificial intelligence and computer vision to analyze satellite imagery that looks exactly like this. This is a spot we picked in the Permian Basin, showing you a time series every few days. And what you see getting built here is a series of lease roads, a series of well pads, the mud pits getting built and filled on those pads, frac ponds getting built and filled in. None of these things can be detected with conventional energy intelligence. There are no permits filed for any of those things. And yet, a lot of interesting stuff happening on the ground in the oil field that just never shows up in regulatory records or shows up on such a long delay, like the actual fracs or initial production reports or flare permits. They show up so late that they're just not useful by the time they come out. There's no edge in that. And of course, with the conventional regulatory data, like the drilling permits, everyone has that, so there's no edge there either. CNN here, by the way, is not the cable news network. It's convolutional neural nets. It's a type of AI that we use. So we started detecting all these things from space, and we realized we were kind of on a roll. There was a lot of interesting stuff we were seeing. It wasn't just the frac pits. And so we started going deeper and deeper into how do we exploit new kinds of technologies that have only become available in the last 5 years to develop completely next generation oil field and energy intelligence insights. And so we took advantage of huge advances in cloud computing, like on AWS, where we're now able to do storage and compute for fractions of a penny that would have costed literally millions of dollars just 20 years ago. We took advantage of big data architecture and new kinds of database systems that let us keep track of and analyze incredible amounts of big data from government agencies, not just the regulators you know, like the Railroad Commission, but all kinds of obscure sources in many other agencies in many states. We started applying new kinds of 3D and 4D geoscience models to understand what's happening under the ground. And most significantly, we started bringing in multiple kinds of satellite intelligence, not just the optical imagery that we can see, like that image I just showed you, but infrared imagery that makes the water pop out, and synthetic aperture radar, which allows us to see metal moving around on the ground, even through cloud cover. And we started combining all of these with another level, which is cell phone tracking data. So we're now able to license huge amounts of anonymous aggregated cell phone ping data from hundreds of millions of people every day. This is going on all over the world, by the way. We didn't invent it. And we're able to apply that to the intelligence as well to get essentially this 360 holistic view of what's really happening in the oil field weeks, months, sometimes infinitely before you would ever find that out from the traditional intelligence services or somebody on the ground. And we've turned this into a number of data as a service, software as a service type of products. We're really a data first company, but we had to build software systems for people to be able to see and consume the kinds of things that we're finding. The two that we're going to focus on today are the last two that I've got on this list, Dirt Work Alert and Fracscape. So with Dirt Work Alert, we use different kinds of satellite imagery and regulatory data to see drilling and completion activity or plans and preparation on the ground earlier and more accurately than looking at permits and rigs. And in Fracscape, we add in that cell phone tracking layer to actually identify the individual work crews, the frac crews, the rig crews, even the individual sand trucks and crude oil and water trucks as they move on a daily basis from pad to pad in between facilities. So now let's talk about how we use these technologies specifically to satisfy mineral intelligence objectives and why so many of you all in this room have been signing up for our service, which we really appreciate. But I'm not going to name names because I know you don't want me to. First, there's a ground game edge, right? The first call is the most likely to close when there's a new mineral deal. You're also the most likely to get the best price. And we're able to help you avoid chasing false flags like the huge numbers of random permits that never get drilled. We enable better valuations because you're able to see what's happening in that package, even if it's publicly marketed to everybody, then the person selling the package knows themselves, right? It's not just about the permits and the drilling in progress. We're able to show you which permits have pads, which have pads but don't have permits yet, whether there's ponds filling up that tell you that a crew is on the way, even though it's not even there yet. And I'm going to talk about these different kinds of applications, which helps you buy at just the right time and also sell at just the right time so that you get the peak value for that asset and don't leave money on the table. And number three, I'm going to talk about getting a faster time to pay by having a better understanding of when the crews are really coming to your packages, when they're coming to your assets, when they're going to start drilling, when they're going to start fracking, even before they get there. So number one, ground game edge. This is probably the number one thing that brings people in the door, which is being the first call, getting the best price, and avoiding false flags. So it's important to understand, first of all, because a lot of people don't realize this, on a lot of leases, the well pads start to be built before any permit is ever filed. This is pretty common, and I'm going to show you some numbers on it. So there is very often an opportunity to see where drilling plans are developing even before the first permit comes out. Also, the water features matter too, because mud pits and frac ponds start getting built and fill up before the rig and before the frac crew ever gets to the lease. So again, this is a way of seeing early what's going to happen. And we've built a system that enables you not just to trust the AI, but actually to go in and see with your own eyes what's been happening on that site so that you don't waste your time chasing stranded assets or permits that are unlikely to get drilled. You can really see what's happening on the ground from your armchair, I think as our intro said, if you have an armchair. And it also makes sure that you never miss an opportunity, because even if you're fielding a land team 100 deep, you're not going to know what's happening on every section of the Permian Basin or another shale play all the time. I mean, the Permian Basin is actually the size of the 9 smallest US states combined, right? Like, no one's able to cover the whole thing on the ground, and most of it you can't even see it from the road. And you know, what this adds up to is what, again, one of our customers, different customer, we have more than one, said, quote, how do you level the playing field between a guy in Midland and a guy in DFW? The answer is Sourcenergy. So let's talk about Dirt Work Alert, where we've gotten a bunch of patents on it, and it's for seeing drilling and completion plans before permits and rigs and avoiding false flags. So we've studied this extensively, and we've tried to update this every quarter. We're a couple quarters behind now. But in about roughly 1/4 of wells drilled, the well pad is constructed and detected earlier than the very first permit submission on that pad. Not permit approval, permit submission. If we were looking at approved permits, it's more like 1 in 3 gets a well pad before it gets a permit approved. So you really can get an earlier edge on who's going to drill where when you're looking at the well pads, not just the permits. Here's an example of that. There's lots of examples. But here's an XTO lease, a couple of XTO pad sites that got built summer 2021. And what you see here, this is in our Dirt Work Alert time machine that I'm going to show you in a minute, is we had these pads built, and they were definitely built about a week before the pending permit got submitted and several weeks before it was approved. And so here, beginning of July of 2021, you're seeing there's no pads on the site. Nothing's gotten started yet. Then, about 2 weeks later, July 16th, you're seeing that the pads are just starting to get built, right? They're just starting to do that site work. On July 21st, a few days later, again, this is in a timeline called Time Machine that's built into our platform, you're seeing that the pads are really getting built on the ground, and the AI actually detects and tags these pads as being pads. Now here's the thing. A lot of y'all are still using Google Earth. Sad to say, but the satellite imagery in Google Earth can be 2, 3, 4 years out of date. So if you're using Google Earth to see what's happening on the ground, you are missing all the action that's going on in the US oil field today. 2 months after those pads were built, here's what Google Earth is showing. Literally nothing. But we don't ask you just to trust the AI, and this is a critical point that our mineral users really love. Because we don't just say, trust us, we identified this pad there, you know, call this person up. Yes, we provide all the surface ownership data, and you can call up and you can call the operator and do all that stuff, but maybe you want to check it out first. And so what we've done is fully integrated into our system. You can grab any spot on the map, literally in the entire world, but let's just assume you're working in the Permian. Grab any spot in the Permian where we've identified new pads. You can grab that spot, and the system instantly generates a movie that reaches back up to 4 years, where you can see every 3 to 5 days what exactly that spot looked like, and you can run the movie backward and forward so that you can see for sure, okay, these are really pads, I can see that. But then you can also switch over from the optical imagery to the infrared and to the synthetic aperture radar. So here you're seeing the infrared. What you see there is that the water pops out. And so now you can see that those mud ponds are getting filled up on those pads, and that tells you there really is a rig on the way. And you can see the frac pond filling up and tells you that there's a completion crew on the way. And with the radar imagery, you can see whether there's really a crew on the site right now, even if it's cloudy. And you can see if they've been doing the work to put in the pipelines, and we also map all the pipeline infrastructure. So you know, is this a stranded asset? Is it really going to get drilled quickly? Is it going to start producing quickly? So all of this together lets you contact mineral owners before competition to get higher close rates and lower prices. It ensures that you don't waste resources chasing low value and stranded permits with the herd that's chasing those. And it lets you cover whole basins, the Permian, the Haynesville, Mid-Con, Bakken, every day without ever missing an opportunity. no matter how big or small your land team is. The second objective I'm going to talk about is better valuations. And actually, even though there's a lot of kind of buzz and appeal to the early detection of pads before the permits come, getting that edge, I think the real value to most mineral investors, and certainly most institutional mineral investors who use our system, is the way that we enable better valuations of packages and help you understand when to get aggressive on a deal that's better than what the seller or other buyers know about, and when to dodge the deal that's probably a really long payout that you want to avoid because it's risky and isn't really set up to get drilled. And also how you make sure that you get every dollar off the table when you decide to sell. An example of that comes from quoting another one of our real-world mineral customers who we got that referral from. This mineral customer said, if you can't read what they said, quote, "We were in direct competition with another group on a large lead, and some recent pad construction in Sourcenergy convinced our board to pay more than our competitor. The pad site construction resulted in permits a few months after close and an early payout." So it made it worth their while to get aggressive on that bid in a very competitive environment. Now, here's probably the most important statistic that you're going to see today. Well pad detections when there's a permit, when a permit appears to them, predict future rig movements at over 90% correlation in 60 days. When a well pad gets built with a permit, it is gonna get drilled. And on median, it's gonna get drilled in about 60 days. But permits only correlate to rig movements 19%. That's not even a correlation. In other words, permit filings are essentially random with respect to who's going to drill where. And why not? A permit costs $250. There's something like 10 times more permits out there than wells that are going to get drilled. But a well pad costs $250,000. So you know when someone builds a pad, they're serious about moving forward on that lease. So permits and pads predict spuds much, much better than permits alone. We all know that many permits are never drilled or they're not drilled for a long time, and that's a critical factor in valuing a mineral asset because it's all about time to pay, right? It's all about the prediction of future cash flows. We also know that permits with pads get drilled much sooner. A pad shows commitment while permits don't. And interestingly, we found that there's a strong correlation between pad size and the number of wells that will eventually be drilled on the pad. So even if no permits have been filed or only 1 or 2 permits have been filed, you can still get a very good idea of what the future cash flow is going to be from that well pad and therefore stacking it up from that lease or that package based on the size of the well pads, even if you don't know anything else. Also, frac ponds, which we detect independently of any other source, there are no permits for them in Texas, strongly correlate to completion crews coming within 30 days. And because we're able to track the individual frac crews by operator and by service company, we can show you exactly on a daily basis where every operator has frac crews working. And even if they're not on your lease right now, you know that with all the long-term contracts in place today, if they're working a lease nearby, they're probably working their way toward the ducts that are on that package that you're considering buying, even if there's no information about work in progress on that package right now. So the last part I'm going to talk about, number 3, is faster time to pay, and I'm going to zip through this. Basically, we figured out a way to track completions, and historically, everyone tracks rigs, but no one's been able to track the frac crews. They don't get reported to the Texas Railroad Commission, and they get reported on a 3 to 12-month lag, if ever, to a nonprofit called Frac Focus that everybody uses and everyone knows has a terrible coverage rate and is extremely delayed. But 90% of new production comes from horizontal wells. So really, fracs are the new rigs. Almost all production now comes from the completion, not the drill. So how do we find these? We created something called Fracscape, where we combine different kinds of satellite imagery. What you're seeing here is, on the upper left, that's synthetic aperture radar, which cuts through the clouds and shows machinery on the site. On the upper right is the optical imagery that shows the well pad that we're tracking. Those little dots are individual guys' cell phone pings. The red dots are pings that we associated with people who work on rigs. The blue dots are pings from people who we figured out work on frac crews. And so we're able to see when there's a party going on a well pad in the Permian or in the Haynesville, what kind of party on a well pad? It's either a rig party or it's a frac party. And so we're able to identify those even down to the individual deliveries of the sand trucks and the water trucks and the crude trucks. And so this gives you real-time pinpoint DUC and frac status. And that allows you to see where the crews are moving toward a completion even when they're not there yet, and be able to value those packages appropriately. You can also create automated alerts for any set of complex areas, whether it's one lease, a whole bunch of leases, a whole basin, and get automated alerts when a frac crew gets in or even just near any lease or area that you're following, whether you own it or not. So you're going to know that they're getting ready for a completion and new production, probably even before the operator's management team knows that. And that way you can make sure that you get paid your royalties on time, just in case they weren't jumping up to tell you that it was coming. One last thing I want to mention with the extra minute from my colleague before is people do ask us a lot about the green gorilla in the room. We get a lot of companies that are adding us or switching to us, and there's some reasons for that. We're very mineral focused. And so we provide all the core oil, gas, and land data that you need, but not all the stuff that you don't need and didn't want to buy. We detect new well pads almost daily, even before the pending permits. The other companies don't do that. They wait till a permit comes out, and then they actually wait until the API number is assigned to the permit, which can be weeks or even months later. So it's useless for that ground game edge purpose that we talked about. We're showing water and pipeline infrastructure in Time Machine and detecting those things. No one else detects water, water infrastructure, and other pipeline information to know is this a stranded asset or really moving forward. We give you those automated AOI alerts we talked about. We're pinpointing the crews daily, including by service company, which others don't do, not just by operator and not daily. You only have to buy the tools and the data and the regions that you want. You don't have to buy all or nothing. We're not forcing you to pay a big contract for stuff you don't need because of monopoly pricing. We're pricing for your budget. And when you talk to us, we're a very small team. We're very mineral focused. You're talking to the decision makers, whether it's me or David or Ian. You're talking to the people who are going to build the thing or direct building the thing that you said you want. So we try to listen to you and give you results. Sadly, we don't have 10,000 plus customers. We've only got in the hundreds, and many of those hundreds are mineral investors, and so we're really trying to serve this market well, and we really appreciate your feedback and input and try to always be improving for that. So again, at Sourcenergy, we're trying to help mineral investors by helping you in the ground game, first to call, first to close, and get the best price, avoiding wasting your time on low value and stranded permits, and making sure you never miss an opportunity in the field, no matter the size of your land team. We're helping you with better valuations on packages because you can better see and predict well status on every lease, better than any sales package that you're going to get, probably better than the seller even knows themselves, which lets you bid high for the good deals that are going to be fast to pay and dodge the bad and risky ones that are going to be slow to pay. And when you're selling, we help you get that peak value by knowing what's really happening on your asset, even if the operator hasn't told you. And we help you get faster time to pay with AOI alerts as crews and pads and ponds get developed on your assets. We help you see the completions coming long before they're reported, maybe even before the operator knows about it. And we help you better predict that production. And with that, I welcome your questions. Please email me, josh@sourcenergy.com. We've got a little display right outside that door there, and we're here today and tomorrow. We're based here in Houston. So please come say hello and ask any questions you have. Thank you very much for having us this week.